showing up when there's an emergency. It's about showing up when there's a hurricane and when there's a tornado. Governing is about taking action. On May 24th, a hurricane, a tornado, hit Uvalde. And the real question is where Greg Abbott was in that entire day. Let's be very, very clear. I think that we've all seen by now that Greg Abbott failed this community in Uvalde, Texas. 19 children were dead. 2 adults died. It took Greg Abbott 70 days to even meet with one single family member. He attended no funerals, as you all know. He provided no actual support to these families. All the families in Uvalde that you've gotten from this governor are lies and fabrications of the truth. We know that since 2015, this community asked for support for radios from the governor's office, and we know that that never came. We saw on the 60th day, the mayor and I put out a request to take the mental health trauma money and give it to the Texas Department of Emergency Management, where both the mayor and I knew would be a better resource allocation for the families involved. The governor, again, took no action and decided to give that $5 million to a lawyer, to the district attorney's office, who bought herself a nice fancy building with that money. Just yesterday, we saw an ABC News story that suggested that the trauma money was ill spent, not being used properly, and not being allocated to the people that it needed to go to. We've seen over the last 3 weeks absolutely no urgency from police officers. In leaked story after leaked story, we've seen cops do absolutely nothing in Uvalde. I've asked this governor time and time again for trauma money. He's not responded to our calls. I've asked this governor for this notion that we need to create this $300 million fund for these families, and that has not happened. DPS waited 77 minutes to try to save dying children in elementary school. He has shown us clearly that he has no urgency, just like those police did. So the real question is, what is he supposed to do? Again, governing is about action. 23 days after this event, 23 days after this event, after event in Parkland in Florida, Rick Scott, that's all it took him and the Congress in Florida, a Republican-controlled Congress, to change the laws. Greg Abbott has done absolutely nothing, and it is clear that Greg Abbott is not the man who can protect our children and protect this state. And so, because of that inaction, and because of what we have seen over the last 3 weeks, as you all know, I signed a non-disclosure agreement. What I'm going to show you today, that's in your press packet, you'll see a letter from the Department of Public Safety, where we asked them to submit calls that went from McCraw, the director of DPS, to Greg Abbott. Those calls and those call logs were submitted to us in these documents. And you have, in yellow, the 3 calls that are blocked from the governor's office. It took the governor 4:05 to make a call at 4 p.m. for 5 minutes, and he spent 7 minutes on the phone with Steve McCraw. By this time, it was reported that 11 children were dead. We all know in this room that 19 were dead, and I'm sure that the governor knew that 19 were dead. The information that I got was that 19 were dead at 5:30. We see then at 5 p.m. with 15 minutes, at 5:15, that he spent another 6 minutes on the line with Steve McCraw. We don't know what was said in that call. After that, we have to wait till 8:41 where he has an 18-minute call with his top cop, with DPS, presumably to discuss what happened that day. But let's be very clear. The actions of this governor were to have 3 calls that span the length of half an hour to discuss the largest tragedy that has befallen this state in years. And he spent 30 minutes on a phone call, but in between those calls, he went to North Texas, went to a fundraiser and collected $60,000. That's what Greg Abbott did. That's not what leaders do, but that's what this person did. I've also included in the packet information that we requested. And those are the calls between Victor Escalon to Steve McCraw. And you'll see those calls as well. Again, not more than 30 minutes. So it is abundantly clear that the lack of urgency that you saw in that hallway is evident of a failure to lead, because we see the same lack of urgency in these calls. Leaders lead. Leaders show up. Leaders show up to hurricanes, to mass shootings. They do things. Like a Republican, like Rick Scott did. This man has done absolutely nothing, and that's why we decided to show you this today. I said it was going to be a very short press conference. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to do it, but I promised I would say something in Spanish, so let me do that. Ya es obvio que hemos visto una gran falla en este gobernador. Lo que estamos reflejando hoy en estos datos que hemos enseñado son las llamadas entre el gobernador y su director de seguridad pública, Steve McCraw. En esas llamadas ocurrieron 2 llamadas muy breves de 7 minutos y de 6 minutos. Esas ocurrieron a las 4 de la tarde y las 5:15. Y después el gobernador se fue a una fiesta para recaudar fondos. Recaudó $60,000 para su campaña. Después él tuvo una llamada de 18 minutos con Steve McCraw. Eso no es lo que hace un líder. Un líder va a la emergencia. Un líder va a llegar al sitio donde murieron 21 personas. Eso no es lo que hizo Greg Abbott. En el otro diagrama tenemos también las llamadas aquí entre Steve McCraw y Victor Escalon. Aquí también de nuevo tenemos evidencia de la poca urgencia que le dieron a estos niños. Los líderes más altos del Departamento de Seguridad Pública. Ya sabemos que hubo errores, eso es obvio, pero aquí ya tenemos una reflexión de la importancia que le dio este gobernador a nuestros hijos hispanos en Texas.
When did you guys get the records?
We've had this for some time.
Why release them today?
Why release them today? That's a good question. You know, this governor has decided to, quite frankly, be political and run a series of ads against me. I don't care about his ads against me. That's fine. I'm a big boy. But the fact is that he has done absolutely nothing. I gave them and their investigation the benefit of the doubt. I held on to this information not so I could drop it as some October surprise or November surprise, but we were told that they were going to do something for this community, and time again they've done absolutely nothing to care for these folks. And we've asked for accountability. We've asked for the trauma funds to be run through TDM, and we've gotten zero action from him. And so he wants to play politics with me and the people of South Texas. I'm going to tell the truth about what went on, and the truth about what he did, and his actions, and his calls, and they're reflective in this document.
Llamadas, ¿por qué no habías informado de estas llamadas?
Simplemente le di la oportunidad a ellos que hagan su discurso, sus estudios, para ver qué tipos de acciones iba a haber para la comunidad. Ya es evidente que este gobernador no ha hecho nada para el público. Esta semana él dirigió a su gente que hagan una publicidad contra mí, algo político para mí. En vez de hacer las cosas que debemos hacer, ayudar a nuestro público, él quiere jugar la política. Pues nosotros vamos a decir la verdad, y la verdad que es que él no le importaron estos niños hispanos. en Sur, Texas.
You said some days, or several days, or how long exactly have you had these documents?
I've had these call logs for about 60 days. I've actually talked to a few more reporters about it. No one really thought it was all that newsworthy. I think that it's very newsworthy in light of what we've seen in the last 3 weeks. And what we've seen in the last 3 weeks is a lack of urgency by cops. And it's the same, this is reflective of the same kind of lack of urgency. Look, the state representative was down there that night. I was down there that night. Every elected official and public servant that served that area was down there that night, except for Greg Abbott. He went to a fundraiser. Guess what? I had a fundraiser that same day. I canceled my fundraiser to go down and be with those families that night. That's the difference. That's what leaders do. Apparently this politician wants to be a politician.
Well, if you got these 60 days ago, why did you not release them? I know you talked a little bit already, but why did you not release them 59 days ago?
Well, that's a fair question. The fact is, I was waiting for their investigation to play out. I did talk to several reporters about them. Nobody was all that interested in them. A lot of people said that they actually had them. So I thought that they were released in batches that had been released to reporters. But apparently these were released to me.
These are all from McCraw to Abbott and to Escalon, correct?
That is correct.
So the first call came from McCraw to Regional Director Victor Escalon, came at 12:55. That's after the shooter was dead.
And let's be clear. These are the calls from Escalon to McCraw or vice versa. They could have been talking on their radios. They could have been talking on signal. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They could have been talking on some other communication. We know that the radios weren't working. But all we have in calls are these 4 calls on the 24th. You'll have to ask the governor if he made other calls or if he made other calls to other people.
When we look at these call logs, we look at the behavior of Governor Abbott on other mass shootings that have happened in this state, it's typical behavior that he does not go the first day. If we look at what happened at Sutherland Springs or in El Paso or in Santa Fe, he does not typically go the first day, it's days afterwards. So why is this so significant that he did not go to Uvalde that day it happened?
It's not just the not going to Uvalde. It's the lack of importance that he placed on the communications between him and his top cop. A 7-minute call, a 6-minute call, go to a fundraiser, collect 60 grand, and then make another, a little longer call, 18 minutes. The fact is, you have the largest calamity that has faced our community in a very long time and killed 19 children. He should have been there. He made choices. His choices were not to leave. His choices were to fill his coffers of his campaign.
¿Hay alguna manera de que podamos saber el contenido de estas llamadas?
No es imposible, no me
¿Por qué?
dieron el contenido.
¿Pero se pueden pedir o simplemente no te las van a dar?
No creo que la tengan, ¿verdad? No hay audio.
For those who say this is just a political stunt to release these today, the day before the election happens, what would you say to those people?
Listen, I have been trying to seek the truth, and you all well know it, for months on end. This agency and this governor and this government has been less than candid with you and less than truthful with the people of Texas. I think that by now we can all agree that we have seen misinformation after misinformation from the Department of Public Safety. On the times that this governor has ever done anything is only when he's backed in a corner. It's only when he's backed in a corner. The facts are the facts. We want people that are going to act in government office. He did not act. It is about actions and not about words. Listen, the fact is, this governor has very recently taken a political stance against me, and that's fine. He wants to play politics, that's fine. I'm here to try to solve the problems for the people of Uvalde. It would be nice, for a moment, if this guy would engage in that process, rather than abrogate his responsibility.
You mentioned wanting to solve the problems for the people of Uvalde. I want to bring up another point that the autopsy records have now been sealed from the families. A district court judge has sealed those autopsy reports. What are you going to do for the people of Uvalde to stop that from happening, to try and get these parents answers about their kids who died?
Yeah, as you know, I had a press conference last week in Uvalde to announce the $300 million compensation fund, and we're going to keep working for that into the session. In that press conference, after talking to Nelson Wolff, I told the families, I told you all, that those autopsies would be ready this week. Indeed, they were ready late last week on Thursday, and they were delivered on Friday to the Justice of the Peace, which is what the process calls for. And speaking to Red Cross and other members, other family members, they've tried to gain those autopsies, and unfortunately, we're not able to. Again, people will decide in history whether this was a cover-up, whether law enforcement was covering up for their actions, whether a governor was covering up for the failures of his agency and his operations that are going down in the valley or down in South Texas. But the facts are very clear. The district attorney told these families that those autopsies weren't going to be ready for a year. We heard 2 weeks ago up in Austin at the Public Safety Commission that those autopsies would be ready by the end of this year. I called Nelson Wolf to find out, Judge, are they ready? And he found out for me that they were forthwith, that they were coming right around the corner. And indeed, we got them very quickly. For this district attorney to keep these documents away, because this application that was made today was done by the DA, okay, on behalf of the judge to seal those documents. Those families, by law, are entitled to those records. By law. Those records, quite frankly, are open records under the Open Records Act. But that's the space that we're in. Everything for the last 6 months has been hidden by this agency and by people in power to cover up their failures. Let's be very clear.
¿Qué están tratando de encubrir al no dar a conocer esos análisis forenses? ¿Qué están tratando de encubrir? ¿Por qué no los quieren dar a conocer?
Pues no sé, pero la realidad es que esas familias han pedido esos documentos, quieren ver el análisis si sus niños estaban vivos. I mean, it is important to find out if those children were alive and at what time. We all know that the average shooting lasts 10 minutes. This lasted 77 minutes. And children likely died waiting for that relief. En esos 77 minutos, niños probablemente murieron esperando a esos policías. Esto fue el peor incidente de un rescate en la historia de los Estados Unidos. Eso es lo más importante que tenemos que ver. Este gobernador está ocultando la información más importante para estas familias para no enseñar las fallas de su gobierno.
Esas autopsias entonces iban a mostrar lo que en realidad
iban a mostrar si esos niños están vivos o no estaban vivos.
Senator, the judge said that they were sealed, the autopsies were sealed to assist in the investigation for Busby. Is that, and we've been told that will last a year to 18 months to possibly even 2 years. Is that an acceptable time frame for these records to be sealed from the families?
It's not acceptable to me, and it's not acceptable to those families. You'll have to decide whether it's acceptable to you. But I think that you've all gotten to know these families. Every one of you have been a part of this process. Every one of you has probably lost some level of objectivity as I have. These people are good people. They deserve a hell of a lot better than they got from government. What happened on that day was a failure at every level. And what's happened since then has been a failure. I'm not here to play politics with Greg Abbott like he's been trying to play with me over the last 4 days. I'm going to continue to try to solve things. I'm going to continue to try to get to the bottom to the truth of what happened here on that day. And I know you will too, because that's your job, to find the truth. What's sad is that we have a governor that has refused to tell you the truth, and has refused to acknowledge the failures of his agency.
What is your next step then to try and get those autopsies faster than the DA's investigation?
Well, on Friday I spoke to Red Cross. You know, we weren't expecting the sealing of these documents. We were supposed to visit today on this issue. I'll be talking to other members of the family, of different families. You know, we want to be able to do things and give people a reasonable amount of time. Again, DPS made it very clear that by the end of the year, we would have everything that we needed to see. Under no certain terms am I going to allow this district attorney to go on for a year in keeping this information from these families. Let's be clear, the failure was a failure that was driven out of What happened there that day was gross negligence. It was malfeasance. It was conscious disregard for human life. It was cops that cared more about themselves than those children inside. If you want to turn that air on, you can. It'll just be loud. And so that's where we are. Any other questions?
So what's next, Senator, for doing a legal challenge here, so you can?
Let's just turn it on. I'll speak louder.
It is pretty fun.
So where we are on what's next for us is we're going to start the legislative session. Let's talk about the rest of the stuff I know. A non-disclosure agreement that I signed and said I couldn't say anything. And these documents that were obtained a long time ago, not subject to an NDA, as you well asked. When I'm in the legislature, I'm not confined by that non-disclosure agreement under the speech and debate clause. We're going to tell the truth one way or another. I'm going to add amendments to every bill they put up. We're going to have a discussion on Uvalde if those people are still in power. Whether they like it or not. Their agency failed, and it continues to fail.
Well, you mentioned you had these documents for about 60 days. If you're able to obtain those autopsy reports, obviously getting them to families first, but will you make a commitment that you won't hold them for 60 days?
Will I make a commitment?
That you won't hold those autopsies for 60 days?
No, and to be fair, you know, I didn't go have a press conference, but I think I've shared those with several reporters. They didn't think it was newsworthy, to be fair, very early when we got that. You know, again, I'm bound right now. I'm in a spot where this governor has chosen to have a political undertone on what he is doing in regards to me, and I don't care about that. We have to tell the truth about what's happened here and the truth about where he was on that day and what he did. These are choices that Greg Abbott made. He chose to have a 7-minute phone call and a 6-minute phone call and an 18-minute phone call. He chose to tell you that it is unconstitutional for us to have an age limit increase. 18 states have age limit increases. 18 states. The cases that he cites are factually distinguishable. I'll debate him on that issue any day he wants. He has had no action whatsoever. He refuses to accept accountability, and he refuses to fire the cop that failed to train his workers, his employees, his deputies, his troopers. They failed to do interagency training in those communities, and they failed to respond. And Greg Abbott failed to provide radios in the communities that they were working in most.
You mentioned if they're still in power, bringing this stuff up on the floor where we're not bound by the NDA agreements. Why the specificity there? Shouldn't people know this stuff even if they lose?
Well, they're going to know it either way. I'm saying if they're going to hear it on the floor that way. I'm sure if they're not in power, we're going to have a very open discussion as to what happened and what the responsibilities are of the state of Texas going forward to those families. Because let's be very clear, those cops are protected by immunity, they're protected by the Texas Tort Claims Act, and the things that occurred in there. No parent anywhere in the state of Texas should be happy with what went on in Uvalde, should expect that that's the normal course of business when it goes to saving their children. But that's what happened. And it happened to Democrat kids, and it happened to Republican kids, but it happened in South Texas where those cops that should have known better did absolutely nothing. In the entire United States of America, this is the worst response to a mass school shooting ever. Let's be very clear. We need to be very clear. And the post-response from this governor has been exactly the same. Lackluster doesn't do it justice. He has been down and out disrespectful to this community. Didn't even remember the children's names when he talked to Brett Cross. Didn't even know Brett Cross's kid's name. That's who we're dealing with.
Roland, hay una cosa. Las personas que por primera vez te pueden estar oyendo, que tú no puedes hablar de ciertas cosas porque firmaste un documento. ¿Cuándo lo firmaste y qué tipo de documento es que no te deja hablar?
Yo firmé un documento para obtener todas las evidencias y desafortunadamente ya he visto todo. he visto fotos que nunca he querido ver en mi vida, videos que nunca he querido ver. He visto cosas que se reflejan en la batalla de guerra, en el teatro de guerra. Pero uno espera que esas cosas le van a pasar a soldados en el teatro de guerra. No esperas que vas a ver niños muertos. No esperas eso. Y no esperas la negligencia que he visto, que hemos visto en ciertas historias en los últimos 3 semanas.
¿Te dejaron ver esa evidencia siempre y cuando firmaras?
Así es.
Regarding the autopsies, I believe one of the families, Kimberly Rubio, said that no one should be able to see these autopsies except for the family. Will you still fight for them to be released, even if that's not what the families want?
Well, I've always been very respectful of families, first and foremost. The law allows them to be public records. And so what I would hope is that this district attorney would at least let the families see, the ones that want to see it, because not every family wants to see all of this stuff. And then gives it over to law enforcement, and here in December, you know, we figure out how those things are going to be distributed. You know, what I've noticed in stories that have come out lately is, luckily, we haven't seen any images that we shouldn't see. And so I think that your industry is probably, your profession is probably respectful of those images. And I think that that's something that you'll have to decide through your standards and practices teams and how you deal with those family members down the road. It's not my call, right? The law is very clear on what happens with these documents. And as much as I would like to protect those families, and I've been very protective of these families, and I'll continue to do that, the law is very clear. But I think that there are ways that we can protect those families and show imagery, or at least diagrams, because that's really that's the most important thing about these autopsies, is to see which children were alive and how long they were alive. If we can decipher that. We know for a fact, because the parents told me, that A. Marie Garza was shot through the abdomen, and that bullet came out through the kidney, and that little girl likely bled out. Xavier Lopez died on the way to the hospital. Eva Morales died on the way to the hospital. Let's be clear. Everything that I've talked about over the last several months has been about failure. Ask yourselves what would have happened had cops gone in at 57 minutes, at 47, at 37, at 17. How many children would be here with us today? And had they waited a little longer, like one cop wanted in the way, like one state trooper, well, Bettencourt said, stand by, don't go in. We saw that in the news recently. Maybe Mary has more of it. Those are the what-ifs that will haunt these people for the rest of their lives.
Regarding the Uvalde compensation fund, last week, that fund would have a board with Governor Abbott, or whoever the governor is,
Governor,
whoever the
Lieutenant
lieutenant governor and
House.
Speaker of the House. Have you spoken to any of the 3 of them directly since that?
We sent letters out, and we have not gotten a response back, but we sent letters out to them about our bill, and we're going to have that discussion after this election. Again, I'm not here to play politics with people. I'm here to solve problems.
So you have not spoken to any of them?
Not spoken to them. I've sent them letters, let them think about it. I'll talk to them after this election and see where they want to be. So they have a choice again. Their choice is, are they going to acknowledge the failure of their cops? Or are they going to ignore these people? They have a choice, just like the United States had a choice after 9/11. And there was no negligence on behalf of cops on 9/11. They all went into those buildings and died and perished. Quite the difference, isn't it? Cops went in there, did absolutely nothing for 77 minutes, talked about not wanting to get killed, talked about it being dangerous in there. Any other questions? Thank you all. Appreciate the time.